It's funny how the smallest moments, the ones you don't think twice about, can change your life forever. That's how it started. It wasn't some dramatic event, no grand confrontation or blazing argument. It was just one moment, seemingly insignificant, that unraveled everything. And I never saw it coming. I was just walking down the street that day. It was late afternoon, the sun already dipping below the horizon, painting the sky a soft orange-pink. There's this cafe, just a few blocks from my apartment, the kind of place that never stood out. It was always there, like background noise in a city that never truly paused. People come and go, conversations mix into one another, and you can't help but blend into the crowd. I've passed by it hundreds of times, barely registering it. That day, though, something pulled me in. I didn't know why, but I couldn't stop myself from walking toward it. It wasn't my plan to stop. I just kept walking, my thoughts lost in some routine I couldn't shake. The work I had to finish, the bills piling up, the mundane tasks that fill up a life. But as I approached the cafe, I saw her. My wife, Clara. Now, before you think you know the rest of this story, let me stop you right there. This wasn't some sweet, comforting moment where I see my wife sitting with a couple of friends, laughing and sipping coffee like the perfect wife in a perfect world. No, it was different. Clara wasn't alone. That would have been fine. What struck me wasn't the group of friends she was with or the fact that she was casually sitting at the window, sipping coffee. It was the man sitting next to her. He wasn't a stranger. No, I'd seen him before. But there was something about the way they sat next to each other that felt off. They were too close, Not just friendly, but intimate. And that was the moment I should have turned around and left. The gut feeling told me everything I needed to know. But I didn't. I stood there, just across the street, watching them, watching her laugh, her head thrown back as he said something funny. She looked different. It wasn't the Clara I knew. This was someone else, someone I had never seen before. I didn't know how long I stood there, my feet frozen to the pavement. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a few seconds. I watched as her hand rested lightly on his arm, the kind of gesture I'd never seen from her before. And then it hit me. I wasn't just witnessing something out of place. I was witnessing the beginning of something I couldn't fully understand. Something was wrong, and I knew it, but I didn't know how to react. Should I walk in and confront them? Should I let it go and pretend I didn't see anything? The worst part was that I didn't know if I was ready for the truth. And that's when Clara turned and saw me. At first, I didn't think she noticed. I wasn't sure if she saw me standing there, too far to be caught, but close enough to be visible. But then, it was like the world slowed down. She looked at me, and for a split second, the smile faded from her face. It wasn't a dramatic gasp, a running out of the cafe kind of moment. No, it was more subtle. But that's what made it worse. It was in the way her expression changed, a flicker of something like guilt, maybe shame, maybe both. The man she was sitting with noticed too. He looked over at me, not with the confusion of someone caught in the middle, but with something else. It was a kind of understanding that made the air around me grow cold. I wasn't angry. Not yet, at least. I was just confused. Confused and lost. Clara quickly stood up, stumbling over her words, and excused herself from the table. She walked toward me, her eyes never leaving mine, her face now a mask of nervous energy. I stood still. I couldn't move, couldn't think straight. What was I supposed to say? Was there even anything to say? By the time she reached me, I had no words. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. I started, but the words felt like they were choking me. She gave me a small, awkward smile, the kind that people give when they're caught in a lie, when they know something's off but can't quite admit it. And then, she said something that I wasn't prepared for. I didn't want you to find out like this. Her voice was so soft, so gentle, but it carried a weight. A weight I wasn't ready to carry. I wanted to ask her everything. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But in that moment, I couldn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't just finding out something about her. I was finding out something about myself. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. And that's when I realized I had no idea who she was anymore. The person I thought I knew so well, the woman I had shared years with, was now a stranger standing in front of me. The worst part wasn't just that I didn't recognize her. It was that I didn't recognize myself, either. The air between us was thick with silence, so thick I could almost feel it pressing down on my chest. Clara stood there, a few feet away from me, her hands nervously fiddling with the straps of her purse. I didn't know what to say, didn't even know where to begin. How do you confront someone you've trusted your entire life, someone you've built a life with, when everything you thought you knew is suddenly shattered in a single glance? She looked at me, but her gaze was empty, like she was waiting for me to make the first move, to say something that would make everything okay. But there was nothing I could say. I didn't want you to find out like this, she repeated, her voice almost apologetic. It felt wrong, almost too rehearsed. There was no panic in her tone, no rush to explain herself. It was as though she had expected me to walk in, to catch her. And that thought struck me harder than any words could. Had she known I would show up? Was this something she had planned, or was this just an unfortunate coincidence? Then why didn't you tell me? I finally managed to say, my voice low, as if I was afraid the question would break something fragile inside me. Why didn't you just be honest? Her eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw something in her expression, something real, something human. Fear. I hadn't seen that fear in her eyes in years. It was a subtle shift, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the upper hand. I didn't know how, she said, almost whispering, like the words themselves were heavy with the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. I couldn't stand there any longer. I turned and walked away, not knowing where I was going, just needing to get out of that moment, out of that place. My thoughts were spinning, tumbling over one another. The life I thought I had was unraveling, and all I could do was watch it burn. I didn't know how far I walked or how much time passed, but eventually, I found myself sitting on a bench near the park. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was a deep, aching emptiness. What did I even want from Clara? Answers? Apologies? The truth? My mind kept going back to the man at the cafe, the one sitting too close to her, the one who was clearly more than just a friend. Who was he? Was this an affair that had been going on for months, years, or had it just started? And then the thought hit me like a ton of bricks. What if it wasn't just him? What if there were others? What if everything I had believed about my marriage was a lie? I didn't have answers. I didn't know where to go from here. But I knew one thing. My world had changed in a way I wasn't prepared for. I don't remember how I got home that evening. My steps felt heavy, as if the weight of what I had just seen was dragging me down. When I opened the door to our apartment, it felt different. It wasn't the kind of difference that comes from a change in decor or the position of the furniture. No, it was something deeper, a shift in the air that only comes when something is terribly wrong. Clara hadn't come back yet. The silence in the apartment was almost suffocating. I tried to distract myself by pacing, by doing anything to keep my mind from running wild. But all I could see was her, sitting there in that cafe, laughing with him, someone I didn't know, someone who had crossed that invisible line between friendship and something more. I sat down on the couch, my thoughts running in circles. Was I overreacting? Should I have confronted her in the moment? Or should I have just walked away and tried to forget what I saw? But deep down, I knew I couldn't forget it. It was burned into my mind, every laugh, every glance they exchanged. There was no erasing that. The door creaked open. I looked up, my heart in my throat. Clara stepped inside, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. She closed the door behind her, but the space between us felt like an ocean. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could I say? How could I even begin? She stood there for a moment, her back turned, her shoulders tense. The silence stretched on, each second heavier than the last. Finally, she turned to face me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but there was no apology, no explanation in them. I never meant for you to find out like this, Derek, she said softly, her voice breaking as if she were struggling to hold herself together. Then why didn't you tell me? I asked, finally finding my voice. The question came out harsher than I intended, but the frustration was too much to hold back. Why didn't you just be honest with me? Clara took a step toward me, her eyes pleading for something. Understanding, forgiveness, I wasn't sure. But it didn't matter. I was scared, she whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix this. Fix it. The words escaped before I could stop them. You don't just fix things like this, Clara. You don't just walk into a cafe and act like everything's fine, like you haven't been lying to me for God knows how long. Her face twisted with guilt, but there was something else there, something that made my heart skip a beat. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to acknowledge it, but I knew. The truth was starting to settle in, and the weight of it was unbearable. There was no way around it. Clara was hiding something, and whatever it wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a slip-up. No, this felt like something planned, something carefully hidden beneath layers of lies. I stood up, unable to stay still any longer. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. I didn't even know if I wanted to hear the answer. But I had to know. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Then, slowly she spoke. "His name is Greg. He's someone I've been seeing for a while now." The words hit me like a slap in the face. Greg? The man in the cafe? My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How long had I been living in the dark, completely unaware of the truth? Clara's eyes were filled with tears now, her whole body shaking as she stood before me. She looked broken, and in some ways, that made it worse. "I never meant for it to happen this way," she sobbed. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep lying to you anymore. I couldn't pretend." I felt like I was suffocating. The room felt smaller with each passing second. I wanted to leave, to run away from everything. Her, the apartment, the life we had built together. But I couldn't move. I was stuck, frozen in place, trying to process what she had just said. For a moment, we just stood there, the only sound the quiet sobs escaping from Clara's mouth. I felt my anger rising, but it wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something more painful. It was the feeling of betrayal, of realizing that the person I had trusted the most had been lying to me for so long. And then, as if it all clicked into place, I realized something even worse. This wasn't just about Clara. This wasn't just about the affair. No, this was about me. The man I had become, the person I had allowed myself to be. Someone so blinded by love and trust that I had ignored every sign, every little red flag that had been waving in front of me for months. I wasn't angry at Clara anymore. I was angry at myself for not seeing the truth sooner. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why him? Why like this?" Clara looked down, her tears falling freely now. "I don't have an answer for that, Derek. I don't know. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I can't undo what I've done." And in that moment, as I stared at the woman I thought I knew, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust, the love, the future we had planned, it was all gone. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I could ever get it back. I couldn't stand the weight of the silence between us. Every second felt like an eternity. Clara was still standing there, her face a mix of regret and exhaustion. I could see the tears streaming down her cheeks, but they didn't reach me. Not anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you, Derek," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far." I looked at her, but it felt like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, was now someone I couldn't recognize. The thought stung. I wanted to reach out to her, to comfort her, but there was nothing left inside me to give. "You should have told me," I said, my voice shaking, but not with anger, more like the hollow echo of what used to be. "You should have told me before it got to this point, before it ruined everything." "I know," she whispered. "I was scared, scared of losing you." That hit me like a punch to the gut. Scared of losing me? I couldn't wrap my head around it. She had already lost me the moment she chose to lie, to betray me in the worst way possible. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The woman I thought I knew would never do this. "You." I stopped myself, realizing I was only making it worse. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry, Derek. I never meant for it to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did. I know that now." I could feel the coldness settling in. The coldness that had been building ever since I saw them together at the cafe. I had always been the type of person who avoided confrontation, who chose to believe the best in people, even when the signs were staring me in the face. But now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't pretend. Clara was right about one thing. She had hurt me, and nothing could undo that. I didn't know what to do. Should I stay and try to fix this mess? Could I ever look at her the same way again? The man, Greg, the one she'd been seeing behind my back, still loomed in my mind. Who was he? What did he have that I didn't? And why had Clara chosen him over me? I didn't want answers anymore. I didn't want the truth if it meant tearing apart the last shred of what we had. The love I once felt for her seemed like a distant memory now, like something that had never truly existed. I turned away from her, unable to face her anymore. "I don't know what to say, Clara. I don't know what to do." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know the truth. The truth. That word echoed in my mind. The truth. But was it too late for the truth? Could the truth ever bring us back? Could it fix the broken pieces of what we once had, or was it too late to even try? As I stood there, staring at the life I thought I knew, I realized something. The truth had already set us on a path from which there was no return. And no matter what happened next, things would never be the same again. The days that followed felt like I was moving through a fog. I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts were always tangled up in what had happened. Clara's presence in the apartment felt suffocating, yet when she wasn't around, the emptiness felt even worse. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting with him, laughing and leaning in toward him in a way that was so intimate, so natural. It haunted me. She tried to talk to me, to explain, but every word felt like an echo from a life I no longer recognized. I kept telling myself I needed answers, but when she spoke, I found myself backing away even more. What could she say that would change anything? Would I believe her, even if she tried to explain why it all happened? I spent my days lost in thought, trying to piece together how everything went so wrong. Was this just a betrayal of trust, or was it something deeper? Had Clara really been unhappy, or was this just a moment of weakness, a fling that spiraled out of control? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. But the truth was, I was trapped. Trapped between the man I used to be, the one who trusted, who loved unconditionally, and the man I was becoming. Someone who couldn't look at his wife without seeing the lies, the deceit. One evening, I decided I needed some space. The apartment had become a cage, and I needed air, anything to clear my mind. I walked aimlessly around the city, not caring where I went. My feet led me to a small bar, one I had passed dozens of times, but had never stopped at. The low hum of conversations, the clink of glasses, the dim light that hung above the bar, it all felt like a strange relief from the heavy atmosphere I had left behind at home. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and tried to lose myself in the noise. It wasn't working. My thoughts kept spiraling back to Clara, to Greg, to the life that had slipped through my fingers without me even realizing it. And then, something unexpected happened. The bartender, a guy who looked like he'd seen more than his fair share of broken hearts, noticed my mood. He slid a glass of whiskey in front of me with a nod. "Tough day?" he asked, his tone surprisingly understanding. I stared at the glass for a moment, the amber liquid reflecting the dim light. I didn't answer at first. What could I say? What could I possibly explain to a stranger who was just trying to make conversation? "I'm just trying to figure things out," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, as if he understood, then leaned in slightly. "You know," he said, his voice low. "Sometimes, we think we're the only ones going through the worst of it. But everyone has their story, their mess." I glanced at him, then took a sip of my drink. It burned down my throat, but somehow, it felt like I needed it, like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol or the strange comfort of talking to a stranger, but something inside me clicked. Maybe it wasn't about finding the answers, or about getting back to the life I had before. Maybe it was just about moving forward, whatever that looked like. As I sat there, letting the weight of the situation sink in, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was a message from Clara. "Please, Derek. We need to talk. I can't lose you." I stared at the screen for a moment, my fingers frozen over the keys. I had spent the last few days avoiding her. I couldn't face her yet. I wasn't ready to hear what she had to say. But as I sat there in that bar, I realized something. Maybe it wasn't about her anymore. Maybe it was about me. What did I need? What was I willing to accept? And more importantly, was I ready to face the truth? Not just the one she had given me, but the one I had been hiding from all along? The message blinked at me, demanding a response. I took a deep breath and typed out a reply. "We'll talk. But not tonight." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. And as I set the phone down, I realized the hardest part wasn't going to be forgiving her. It was going to be forgiving myself. The night felt different. The quiet was suffocating, yet comforting in its own way. The bar had offered me a fleeting distraction, but now, as I sat alone in my apartment, the reality of everything started to settle in like a thick fog. I hadn't responded to Clara's message right away. I couldn't. The words felt hollow, like they were just part of the routine. The same words she always said when things got bad. "We need to talk." I had heard those words before, but this time, they felt like a heavy chain I couldn't escape. I spent the next few hours lost in my own thoughts, replaying the last few days over and over again. Every conversation, every quiet moment, every small shift in her behavior that I had ignored suddenly felt like a glaring sign I had missed. And that was the worst part, knowing that I had been blind to the signs for so long. When I finally decided to go to bed, it was almost like I was surrendering to the weight of it all. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, not knowing what to do. Should I confront her now? Should I wait until I was ready to hear the truth? I didn't have an answer. The phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. Another message from Clara. Please, Derek. I'm sorry. Let's fix this. Let's fix us. But could it be fixed? I didn't know. I didn't know if I wanted it to be. I had always believed in the idea of second chances, that love could conquer anything. But right now, I wasn't sure if love was enough to repair the cracks that had formed between us. I stood up, pacing the small apartment. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if everything was closing in on me. The life I had known, the life I thought was real, was now unraveling before me. It wasn't just Clara that had changed. It was me too. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this apartment a few months ago. The message sat on my phone, staring at me, daring me to respond. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the screen. But instead of typing a response, I tossed the phone aside. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what I wanted. Because no matter how much I cared for Clara, I couldn't ignore the reality that we were standing on the edge of something that couldn't be undone. It had been days since Clara's last message. Days of avoiding the inevitable conversation, but also days of silence between us. The kind of silence that starts to feel louder than any words could. When I finally woke up that morning, the apartment seemed different, colder. The small things were starting to add up. The unwashed dishes, the unused coffee cups, the empty space between the two of us that had once been filled with life. The apartment felt like a house, not a home. Clara wasn't there. She hadn't come back the night before. I knew she was staying with a friend, but part of me had hoped she would walk back through that door, that we could somehow turn back time. But there was no turning back. I couldn't pretend anymore. The cracks were too wide. I dragged myself to the kitchen, making a half-hearted attempt at breakfast. I didn't have an appetite, but the routine felt normal, something I could hold on to, even if everything else was falling apart. The hum of the coffee maker was a strange comfort. I poured myself a cup, staring out the window, not really seeing anything. My mind was stuck on the same question. What now? I hadn't spoken to Clara since that night. I couldn't bring myself to. Every time I thought about her, about what had happened, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me. But there was something else there too, something harder to admit. I missed her. Despite everything, I missed her. I missed the way we used to talk, the way we used to laugh, the way she looked at me when we were in love. But that was gone now. It wasn't just about her cheating, it was everything. The years we'd spent together suddenly felt like a lie. I wasn't sure who she was anymore. And the hardest part? I wasn't sure who I was in all of this. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up without thinking, already knowing who it was. Another message from Clara. Derek, please. I need to talk to you. I need you to understand. Can we meet? Please. I stared at the message, the words blurring in my vision. I didn't know what I wanted to hear. Did I even want to meet her? What would it accomplish? Was I looking for closure, or was I just trying to make sense of something that could never make sense? I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair. My mind was a storm, swirling with questions that had no answers. I wasn't sure what was worse, the feeling of betrayal or the uncertainty of not knowing what I was supposed to do next. After a long moment, I finally typed back, Fine, we'll meet, but I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I hit send, the words feeling like they had taken everything I had left. The phone sat in my hand for a moment, the tension in the air almost suffocating. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Clara had already taken something from me. Now, it was time to see if I could take something back from this wreckage. Myself, my sense of who I was, the piece of me that had been lost when I first saw her with him. The meeting was set for later that afternoon. I hadn't spoken to Clara in days, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what would happen when I saw her again. The last time we'd spoken, everything felt so broken, so irreparable. But as I walked to the cafe where we agreed to meet, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the acceptance that there was no going back to how things were. Maybe it was the realization that whatever happened next, I had to take control of my own healing. When I walked into the cafe, Clara was already there. She looked different, tired, worn, like she hadn't slept in days. But there was something else too, something real in her eyes. She wasn't hiding behind excuses anymore. She was facing me, raw and vulnerable. I sat down across from her, and for a long moment, neither of us said a word. The tension between us was palpable, like an invisible wall that neither of us knew how to break. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Derek. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. I want to try." I didn't say anything at first. The weight of her words settled in my chest. There was no easy way to forgive her, no magic words that would erase the pain. But there was a truth in what she said. She wanted to try. And I wanted that too. I wanted to try, even if I didn't know how. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," I said, the words feeling like a confession. "I'm still trying to figure out what I need and what we need." Clara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right, if you'll give me a chance." I sat there, listening to her, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain had disappeared, but because for the first time, I wasn't alone in the mess. Clara wasn't running from what she'd done. She was facing it, and so was I. We weren't out of the woods yet, but we were taking the first step together. We talked for hours that day, about everything. About our mistakes, about the distance between us, about the things we'd both ignored. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were both ready to rebuild. We knew it wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy, but there was a flicker of hope in the room. A glimmer of possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. As I walked out of the cafe that afternoon, something had changed. I didn't feel like the same person who had walked in. The anger, the doubt, it was still there, but it was no longer the only thing defining me. I was moving forward, one step at a time. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something we both needed. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a choice. And that was enough to hold on to for now.